Thank you. That was another amazing session, and we've got lots of questions for you. So Emily, Shani, and Marisa. Emily, we're going to start with you if possible, please.
Yeah.
In my line of work, positions of leadership always go with those who are extroverted, high energy personalities. My fatigue comes across as being low energy, not enthusiastic, not a good fit for leadership roles, even though I have the skills and qualifications to lead. Do you have any advice for overcoming that?
Yeah, that's really tricky. We really value those qualities, right, in leaders. So depending on, what type of field that you work in, I think just as an occupational therapist, I go to really trying to find other ways to manage that fatigue. And, whether you can work from home some days so that, you have more energy, or finding different ways for positioning and things that might help with managing those fatigue levels. Also, I think disclosure comes in there with whether or not you decide to tell your employer, and can kind of feel a little bit more confident in that you're not lazy, or you're not just trying to, be uninterested, but kind of explaining to them why, you might present the way that you do, whether or not that would make you feel more confident in your skills. But that's really, it's a tricky one. Yeah.
Thank you. Question now for Shani. How do you navigate from working to being on disability?
That's a very good question, and a very difficult one to go through, having done that myself. And I feel for everybody who's going through that process. When you are working, you feel like you have a purpose. You have connections with the outside world, possibly. You have a routine, a schedule. And suddenly, when you lose that work and you're moving to disability, there goes the schedule. There goes the contacts with coworkers each day. And there goes what you thought was your purpose. And so it's a time to be really kind and gentle with yourself. It's a time to grieve what you have lost, but also problem solve. What can you do now? Did it help you to be on a schedule when you were working? And so would it help if maybe sleep a little bit longer to heal your body and your mind, but set a time to get up, and a routine. What do you do after you get up? And the same before you go to bed. And then think about, what do you want those hours that you are awake to look like? Are there things that you want to accomplish? Are there things that you have to do? Sometimes we have to clean, the dishes and whatnot. How are you going to get those done in a way that's still supportive of your body and your mind?
Fantastic. Thank you. Marisa, someone said internalized ableism. I never thought of it like that. That's tremendously helpful and important. Thank you for calling attention to it. Are there any extra tips for overcoming internalized ableism?
What an excellent question. For me personally, this has been a perspective shift that feels a lot like switching a light switch on. Really calling myself, holding myself accountable to figure out why I feel pressure to do certain things. Where does my shame come from? Why do I feel guilty? So starting to ask some deep questions, looking at my patterns, but ultimately it's been leaning into the community. It has been reading books by other authors. A really great book that came out recently, I wish I had it here on the shelf, but it is Disability Visibility, which has a variety of different experiences of individuals living a disabled life in the 21st century. It is leaning into those narratives and reading the work that has come before me, honestly, the people that have had these realizations that allow me to actually start asking these questions. So truly, it's putting it back on the community and finding those people that I have the privilege to be able to learn from and that I have access to. So leaning in and making connections, and then giving yourself grace as you start to see the world and yourself in a different capacity.
Fantastic. Thank you. Emily, so we've had quite a few questions that are kind of asking similar questions around disclosing your disability and health conditions at work. So I'm going to try and combine them. So first part of it being, when starting a new job, when should I disclose the condition to get accommodations? And then along from that, is it reasonable to not disclose accommodations until you're given the job? For example, such as not bringing a service dog that you may need every day to the interview. So could you speak around that, please?
Absolutely. It's a huge decision. And I think this is so individual. This is so, personal for everybody, and where you feel like you're at in your journey of kind of understanding your condition and your abilities. I personally have done this in different ways in both school and job settings. And I think, part of it is, do you work in a large organization that has a human resources department that is separate from your direct boss? Can you float ideas by them? For example, with a dog, a service dog, what would this look like in this environment? And you can kind of gauge how that employer, how receptive they would be to that. And I think for me, that's one of the benefits to disclosing early, is to really get a feel for, how does that organization feel about you having different needs? And I think personally, I wouldn't necessarily want to work for an organization that, has a really negative response to that, or isn't going to be willing to accommodate. That being said, not everybody has the flexibility to work, at different places. And so, I think it's feeling it out, and trying to plan ahead, but you might even make that decision on the spot when you're there, based on seeing, how that person is receiving everything else that you're giving them. So I think it's got to be really individualized. And if you can go through a kind of third party through human resources, that can put a little distance between it. But I think in terms of the, like having a service dog, I personally would think that's something that I would want to disclose before starting the job. It might be that you get the job and then you tell them, and if they have an issue with it, that's a whole nother thing. But I think you're going to have that relationship with that employer going forward. And so you are setting a stage for kind of honesty and communication. And so balancing how much you want to share.
Thank you. And Shani, what would your advice be to people who want to create their own opportunity as the only way to stay active and independent, but knowing it could be full of anxiety if we're starting to compare to others?
Yes, isn't that the case? Okay. When you are thinking about starting a business, when you're thinking about starting with a volunteer opportunity, it's really individual, isn't it? You have to think about what interests you, what floats your boat. Some people find joy in creating wonderful art pieces, or maybe they do jewelry, and they find that they're able to redefine their purpose by making ring splints for other people that have instability in their fingers and their thumbs. Or maybe they really want to be with animals every day, and so petting dogs and cats at the local shelter, or taking care of horses at a local barn is what they want to do. So you really need to look at what interests you. What are your skills? What's your background? And what can you physically and mentally do with it, with how you are right now? So there's not a one answer of what can people with EDS do for starting a business. Really, what is it that you want to do, and how can you do that?
Fantastic. Thank you. Marisa, someone starting their PhD and research is based in lab work. Do you have any tips for managing the physicality of work? They find it so hard to pace themselves.
Well, first off, congratulations on where you are at in your degree. I have worked in multiple labs and I know that each one varies differently in what is asked of you. So I have a formula I use when I'm in any situation for accommodation, and that is first recognizing what can be simplified, what tasks can be simplified, then moving into what can be adapted. Emily Rich had some really wonderful resources that are exactly about adaptation and what can you use to work smarter, not harder, which is a brilliant, brilliant phrase. And then if you are running into situations that cannot be simplified, cannot be adapted, how can the time in around the situation be changed? Is it a big activity that you're doing that you can set aside one big activity Monday, another big activity Wednesday, instead of having those in the same day? So how can you space? What things can you add in to help assist with this and rebalance the situation? So I think those are big pieces, but also recognizing where does that pressure to perform come from? If that resonates with you, if you feel like you have to show up and do these things, if you realize that you're having a trouble with pacing, where does that come from? Leaning into, do you feel like you have to perform at a certain level? And if so, why? Sometimes that is legitimate. Sometimes that's some internalized things or expectations we set for ourselves. So I would say twofold: exploring where does that pacing piece fit in for you, and then going through and checking what activities in your daily to-do can be changed to allow you to thrive more in your situation, as well as communication if you are in a trusted environment.
Thank you. That's helpful. Emily, do you have any tips on asking for accessible adjustments while studying at college? And do you have any suggestions for adjustments that someone could ask for with EDS?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few in my presentation. You can go back to those. But college is different than high school or elementary school, absolutely. But some of them, especially for physical, for example, would be being able to take a golf cart or something across campus, having like a special parking space so that you're closer, those kinds of things. I think in terms of requesting, Marisa touched on this definitely with going through the Disability Resource Center or whatever it's called at your university. And, you know, some are better than others in terms of organization and knowing what kinds of things to offer. So I think just as it is with going into a workplace, like an interview, having that list of what are the things that would be helpful for me to have accommodated. Because I think if we walk in with the expectation that someone else is going to come up with those, I mean, sometimes that's the case. Some places are really excellent and will think of things that, you know, other people wouldn't. But most of the time, I think you know yourself, you know the things that are going to make you be most successful. And so using resources like the one the EDS Society has posted online, and there's lots otherwise, you know, if you look online, but having those written out and really walking in with some solid ideas before that meeting, I think is most helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Shani, someone says, I'd love to know how others make accommodations in their career tracks and afford independent health insurance. Working part-time and or opening your own business would make insurance payments close to $1,000 a month. Are there any resources and or information on how to make this affordable?
I am so glad that you asked that question. Thank you for it. Others have mentioned about how it can be so helpful to join support groups, right? So that you can meet others that understand, so that you can get the support that you need when you're going through difficult times. But you know what is also great about joining support groups? They can be great sources of information. They can be where you learn who are the best doctors to see. But they can also be where you can ask what accommodations are best for this type of work, or what is the process where I live for applying for disability benefits, or what is needed to obtain private insurance where I live, because of course these things vary from country to country, right? In a On the Ehlers-Danlos Society's website, we have a page for local EDS and HSD support groups from around the world. So I encourage you to go on there and see which one's closest to you. But we also offer regular virtual support group meetings. And these can be great for talking and meeting with others virtually, just like this, who really understand and who you can talk with and ask, what accommodations are you getting at work? How do I do this? And then finally, the Ehlers-Danlos Society has its message board on Inspire. We have over 105,000 members on Inspire, and that's a great place for you to ask questions exactly like the ones that you asked, but also to use the search box to see if that question has been asked before, and you can read all the way back for all the posts and discussions in that message board, if anyone's asked about it, so that you can read the experiences of others in addition to the answers you get to your own post. And so I really encourage you, when you're asking your questions about, I wonder how other people with EDS or HSD do this, go to your local support group, attend our virtual support groups, and or join our message board on Inspire.
Thank you, Shani. Marisa, do you have any suggested accommodations for online or distance learning in college?
What a great question. Thank you for asking that. One of the biggest surprises that I ran into was the different types of classes that are available. I thought online, in person, that is the end of it. But there are actually professors that will record their entire lecture for that day and upload it. And there are other professors who do not have recorded content. You don't get to see them. So the differences in the style of class is pretty particular. And you have the right to be able to look at the course catalog to see what the description is, what the format is. You can also reach out to the professor to see how they style their class or how they teach their class. And having that information really allows you to select the classes that work best for you. Very often, if you were doing an online degree and taking online classes, you have multiple options for when you can take that class as far as time of day, or if it's an online class that has flexibility, you might be able to watch lecture in bed. There's so many pieces that can already be accommodated. Online has so much flexibility to it. It's just a matter of asking questions early on so you are selecting the classes and there aren't any hidden surprises for you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else beyond the class piece. Of course, if you would like to space out your degree in a way that is more accommodating for you, online works as well. Some programs are more rigid in what classes you have to take and when, but typically speaking, online classes gives you that additional flexibility. So I think there's automatically some extra room that you can take advantage of by asking those questions, whether that's to the professor or going to the administrative office and asking and being empowered with that information so you can select what works for you.
Fantastic, thank you. Emily, this is quoting someone, I haven't been able to work at all since 2018. Every time I try, I burn out in about 2 weeks or less. How do I prevent such a hard burnout and crash? I've tried a multitude of different types of jobs, including online.
So I would look at what's the difference between when you're working versus life now, or when you're not working. And in the process, if you're trying to go back to work again, before committing to a job, I would try and simulate what that's going to look like at home. So, planning a daily schedule that involves you sitting upright, if that's what you're going to do for your job, or getting in the car and driving somewhere, practicing the specific elements of what that job's going to include in isolation without the demands or expectations of work, because there's stress and all kinds of other things that make actually working a lot more challenging. So kind of breaking it down and seeing if you can find yourself or working with a professional to figure out if there's some piece of that that is causing that burnout or that sense of, a flare coming on. And I think you can simulate it too by taking, for students, by taking a course online. You could do like a Coursera class for free, just to practice and use those like cognitive skills as well as the physical skills of sitting up and that kind of thing. But for someone who's working, you could simulate it with volunteerism or other kinds of things, again, that would simulate that job, but in a much shorter period of time. And then when you're ready to go into a work environment, I would say trying to keep days as short as possible, or really going into some kind of a PRN position or something that's part-time, and launching, with a couple of days, a couple of hours each day, and looking at those cycles too, to make sure, are you working a full day and then you crash the next day? Can you kind of keep that a little more level, so you don't get that redlining kind of thing, and try and spread it out with that pacing idea?
Fantastic, thank you. Shani, do you know if there are any support groups or blogs for people fired from a job due to physical disability or asking an employer for a reasonable accommodation? None of my friends, family, or therapists understands my ambiguous loss.
That's very difficult. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of specific support groups for these situations. But in addition to the options that I listed before of in-person EDS and HSD support groups, our virtual support groups, and Inspire, which has over 105,000 members, you could try joining message boards or support groups of even larger groups. For instance, joining groups through the rare disease community, for instance, and asking if there are others who have had the similar experience that you have had. Anytime you are connecting with larger and larger groups, your chances improve of finding other people who have had similar situations to you. And that's, I'm afraid, the best that I can offer.
Thanks, Shani. And Marisa, what are some courses or careers that you would recommend or not recommend for other zebras?
I first want to recognize the very real component here that our body influences what we choose. And there is a truth to that, that some things are maybe more harmful to us, or maybe would be maladaptive. But I really love what Shani said in her presentation, that ultimately we can zoom out and do a kind of a big picture look at what our passions are and find a way to make the field work for us. I entered the field of psychology wanting to be in the FBI, and realizing that was outside of what really my life was going to look like. But I have found such a rewarding career in health psychology that meets everything I was originally looking for. So like I said with the colleges, it's not really the institution, it's the person that makes the difference. So I would say it's the environment. Perhaps it is more where you work and who you work for that really matters, because when you land in a place that is universally accessible, you'll be surprised just how far you can reach. So I want to recognize that there is a real component of it, but at the same time, reach for the stars. There are many passions that we have and our values that are still there, and we can still achieve that. Just like Shani said, there are some really great psychological assessments out there. One is called the Strong Inventory Test, and that looks at not only your values and your morals, but also what you enjoy and what your skills are, and make some really great recommendations for careers that might be a good fit for you. So I just encourage you to dream big, because you never know where you're going to land with the right people around you.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Probably 12 years ago, when I was a photographer struggling to stand up and carry the heavy equipment with my pots, I never would have dreamt that this 12 years later, I'd be standing here with you now. So don't be scared to have those big dreams. Like Marisa said, you never know where they may lead you. And I couldn't think of a better career to be doing. Have the privilege of having these events and working for this incredible organization, colleagues such as Shani and Marisa and Emily. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel as well. What a fantastic set of talks that I know have resonated with so many people. Thank you very much. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It has been so informative listening to our world-renowned speakers, and a big, huge thank you to them all who have donated their time and expertise to this event. Over 60% of the audience were first-time attendees, and that means we've reached hundreds of people from all over the world that have never been able to take part before. And I'm so happy that you have taken the time out to join us today. I hope you've all enjoyed listening to the presentations and workshops that we've put together for you, because events such as these are a central part of the Ehlers-Danlos Society's work. So please do take a few minutes to complete the feedback form that you're going to be emailed after this event. Your opinion is very important to us, and it helps us to keep improving future events. I'd also like to remind all healthcare professionals that in order to claim credits, you need to fill out part 1, the short registration form, and part 2, the feedback form, emailed to you after the event ends. Also, a reminder to all of you, tomorrow we will close voting for Zebra's Got Talent at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll let you all work out what time that is for you. So don't forget to view the entries and vote for your favorite one. And winners of Zebra's Got Talent will be announced tomorrow, along with the award ceremony honoring outstanding community members and healthcare professionals, some of which you have voted for. We will start tomorrow with a pre-event workshop by Jeannie de Bon again. So take those deep breaths and relax. You're going to soften that belly and unwind pelvic tension with gentle, mindful movements and breath. And I really hope you'll join us for that. So once again, thank you so much to everyone who has made today possible. To all of our speakers, our incredible staff members, our sensational translators in Madrid, who have been working so hard behind the scenes to help make this event even more accessible. And a big thank you to each and every one of you watching. We hope to see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, good night, good morning, good afternoon, and bye-bye for now.